So we're going to start putting some context around SQL and what we're doing. I've got several files that I've been playing with and that I've created for you to look at in Python. So I have a database file. This is my database file. It's called users, and it's got the users' names and the passwords in. There's a lot of language, particularly here, that I need to talk to you about later. But what I'm going to be doing now is running this small Python program, which will read all the information that's in this file and print it out to the screen. And then I'm going to sort of create that in Excel and then talk about what SQL will do. So although this is SQL, you don't need to learn this, only if you're going to be doing it in your project. So quickly hopping over before I start to run that program, if I come back to the presentation, there is several parts to SQL. Normally it's called CRUD, C-R-U-D, create a database, read from a database, update a database, and delete from a database. That's really what SQL does. This course seems to have put an S on the front of it, so it's SCRUD, and S is for search, and really that's all you are interested in. Oh, that was nice. That's all you're interested in, is searching for information in your database, and you'll be doing that by reading. So the two pieces highlighted here are all you require for your exam: how to search and how to read a database using simple commands. You will not be looking at creating, updating or deleting at all, only if you are creating a database to hold your project files. So let's take a look at the Python. All this does is view what's in that database and print it out to the screen. So if I run this program, there we go, and I've got a database, and it consists of an ID, a name, and a password. So in this one, the first record in my database is ID 1. The name or the username of the person is Python Geek, and the password for that one is let me in. Again, for the second record, the name or the username is Elite, and the password is Blimey. So I'm going to use this in Excel. I'm going to set Excel up to mimic this information. Let's see if I can actually reduce that. We need to have some understanding of what SQL is operating on. And in this sort of scenario, we are operating on tables. Everything in SQL is tables. Everything in a database is tables. With SQLite, we're really only dealing with one table, but in a true database, as you've seen with MySQL, so if I just put that back up here, I'm dealing with lots of databases, lots of tables, sorry. So if I just open up one of these, we can see in this MySQL all the tables that exist. There are quite a few tables, and this is called a relational database. All these tables link together, they're related to one another. But what we're going to be doing is rather simple. We're just going to have a simple, straightforward one table database, which is generally called a flat file. So let's take a look. The first thing I need to do to mimic in Excel what my database looks like, I'm going to treat this as my table. And the reason why I do that is because when we look at databases visually, they're often represented in a format that looks like a spreadsheet. And we'll see that pretty shortly when we use the SQL browser software down here. So what I've got here are my field names, and I've got 3 of them. I've got ID, I've got name, and I've got password. they are my field names. They're the headings to all my data. And then once I've got my headings, I can then start putting in the data, the record. So each row, so I'm on row 2 now, is a record. So the ID is 1, Python Geek is the name, and let me in is the password. And I'm just going to stretch these out a little bit so you can see the data. So record number 2 is elite, the password blimey. Number 3 is going to be Zebedee. And the password is ask123. Number 4 is going to be Larry, the loner. And finally, number 5 is going to be Puritan and Swordfish. So I've just mimicked exactly what I've got for my database. So if I ran this in anything else, this is what I would see for my database. So let's try that one out. This is a piece of software that you download to your computer. It looks really, really complicated, and it will take a bit of time for getting used to. This top window here that says SQL is where you type your SQL commands. The middle window here is where you'll see the results of your queries or the databases you see. And you'll see in a minute that this actually starts looking like the spreadsheet that we've just done. At the bottom, the execution log is going to give you all the queries that you write. So every time you write a query, it's going to sit down here and it's going to give you some information about it. This window on the left is going to show you all the tables in your database. Now, as we saw when I was looking at the MySQL, this is a MySQL version, we may have lots of tables available to us. But as we're using SQLite, we will probably just have one table like in this database. And we will reproduce our work in MySQL as well. This is important here, connections. Let's take a look back at the Python version. One line here says connect to users. The database or the table is called users, and to be able to use it we need to connect to it. Well, exactly the same happens here. So let's see if I can do this. Let's first of all make a connection. Let's add a connection, and it's asking me what kind of database I'm using. The default one there is Oracle. If I drop down the list I can get MySQL, MariaDB, which is what I've just shown you in PHPMyAdmin. But what we really need here is the SQLite. And I've got to give my connection a name. I'm going to call this one users. Then I've got to go and find the database, which should be a single table. So if I click on there, I can navigate quickly to my database. There it is, users. It's just a file. This is exactly the same file that we see here in Notepad. But what the connection is doing and why we're linking to SQLite is because all of these little nulls, etc., etc., they contain information for laying out data and how it's structured, and it's only good for SQLite. So this would fail miserably in SQL, I think, in MySQL. So I've got a connection. I'm doing exactly the same thing that I'm doing in Python. I am now connecting to users. So if I, whoops, I closed something down I didn't want to close down. I didn't select the database. There we go, users. And if I click OK, what will happen is that users will appear in the left hand side, so I've got a connection to it. I don't appear to have tables. There we go, I've got the table, and I can click on the table and see all of the information in my database. And if we take a look there, it's identical to the Excel version. It really is identical to the Excel version because it's laid out in boxes. I've got 5 records with the username and password, and also it's identical to the Python version that I read the database from. So at the moment all we've done is take a look at the structure of the database. We haven't issued anything or any SQL commands. You will not need to know what we've just done for your exam. I've just set us up by putting some context in place.